Well, thank you. It's working okay, it seems like. So I'm going to move this one out a little bit for me. Give me a second to get the computer file. It was kind of funny. I have been serving as interim pastor for a church. It's about 9 years since it got planted. Point Church in West Palm Beach, Florida. And about a month and a half into it, there's a local cohort. The Southern Baptist churches kind of just did a pastoral cohort, but they didn't have anybody in because they didn't have business to do, which was advantage over the way we get together. They got to just get together and hang out and have some fun. So they were just being welcoming. So one of the guys who worked there came to me and said, tell me a little bit about Truth Point. I said, well, there's about 350 on an average Sunday, maybe 400 members. And they're all 25 to 35, 40 years old. In fact, in the first year that I served there were 20 newborns in the church. So it was really growing pretty well. I was an interim. I'll take it. All the church growth we can get under an interim. And he said, "Oh, you got young people in your church. We can't get any young people. You got to come see how that works." And I said, "Well, I'm the interim. Like I didn't do it." And he's like, "No, you got to come tell us how that works. Tell us how that works. How's reach? How did you grow a church that's so young? I mean, it was 80% people under 40 that were in the church." And so as I asked, because that's what you do when you're paid to talk, even if you don't know the subject, I said, I gotta kind of think about this and look at the church. And one of the pieces that we're not going to spend a lot of time on today, but I thought it's worth bringing up because it fits with what we just heard was, as I started reflecting and started talking to people in the church, so many of them talked about the things the church did as being a primary attraction to them. And I started realizing that this is a part of a cultural change that's occurred. And while it doesn't directly impact the preaching, it does impact who you're going to have listen to your preaching. And something that happened as I was getting ready for it, I was watching some old movies. I just was passing the time, probably on a Sunday, doing receptions these guys took earlier today. Creation and Hunt for Red October came on, and then The Day After Tomorrow. Now, it made me realize, The Day After Tomorrow, if you remember Hunt for Red October, that's the Soviet nuclear submarine that's going to get brought over to the United States, and it's potentially going to destroy the world. And Day After Tomorrow was the end of the world of climate change. I realized, when I was a kid, we were going to get destroyed. I was at school. We were going to get destroyed because guys in suits somewhere in the world were going to push a button. And then that was it. It was hopeless. We were a generation that the world could end at any single moment because of actions that we had no control over whatsoever. And so it's really no surprise that even in the church, because in the church, talking about the big red button, we were talking about being left behind. It was still all going to happen in a second, and there was still really nothing we could do about it. It's really not a surprise that it was a generation that were just consumers. We didn't have a role in making the world better. We just were trying to live as long as we could until somebody somewhere took care of us and killed us. And I think that affected the culture of the church, where that consumerism translated into this identity according to our worship style, according to the way we did things on Sunday morning. Because living during the rest of the week was just, there was a sense of hopelessness to the culture. But then you think about the Day After Tomorrow, and you think about the folks that are coming into churches now, and I think particularly the younger folks, they are primarily thinking about a world like society is the threat. The threats to our continuing existence are these kind of social threats. They're ones of a bunch of people. And even with my daughters, I was asking them, how much do you care about style in a church? And it was just zero. That was the thing. Your identity was your music. You had that worship style. I don't really care. My dad going to me trying to get me to go to the traditional service. You can hear the organ. I was like, I still don't want to hear the organ. What are you talking about? And she's like, I like the big music. I like the big feel. But that's not going to make them to church. They're a generation of people that are let's do something. And I think we did lose in the church for years the idea of the church active beyond the worship and the preaching of the word. So it's not the primary part of the talk for today, but just to kind of to re-emphasize what you just heard. I think we gave up on that too much, in part because of this culture of hopelessness. And I'll send an encouragement that I actually think the church will be more attractive to those who don't know it. As you heard with these Muslims saying, "Why are you helping us?" That even our communities say, "Why are you doing that?" And I want to do that. And you might have people wanting to come in and able to then hear the word, we'll get into here in a minute, able to hear the word because your activity attracts them to get to hear the gospel, not the activity because, oh, that's right, we're supposed to do stuff too because of the gospel. Kind of backwards, almost secondary thinking that I think happened for a while. Go to the postmodernism, and that works just fine. When I was in seminary, and the relativism in post was just everybody was talking about it and everything. They're trying to refigure everything. I went to Reformed Theological Seminary in Orlando, and Nash was the professor of philosophy, and I probably was there. There's probably somebody here that was there with me, but I'm sure many of you went through there when Ron was there. And Ron Nash was our professor. He taught apology, taught the philosophy classes. If you ever interacted with Ron Nash, his books, he's a lot of fun. He's a good teacher. He's occasionally grumpy. Only when he was very frustrated a lot in class with people who were wrong. And there was nobody so wrong as the postmoderns. Relativism drove Ron Nash crazy. And he would talk about, he would carry us through in these apologetics classes, trying to get us ready to go out and talk to people about Christ. But relativism, right? The idea that you can just have your own truth and you could present the gospel and somebody could say, "That's so awesome. I'm so glad that's true for you. And I'm so glad that Jesus resurrected for you, but I just don't believe that. Like, I just don't think that. And like, that's great. Let's just go hang out." This made him crazy. In fact, as you would hear him talk, it was almost like you had to have a double conversion. Like, first, you had to convert postmodern into sort of modern rationalists. And then when you converted them into rationalists, then you could present the gospel and convert them into Christians. So the conversion process was just an anger and frustration at this crazy culture of relativism. And throughout my classes, and not all of them were Ron Nash classes, postmodernism was constantly a subject area. Talk to relativists. So apologetics, it became a lot about making sure that you do relational apologetics in your preaching, trying to engage people's ideas, and even trying to engage the of relativism altogether, trying to kind of push in preaching, like, hey, we've got to actually tell people that there's such a thing as truth. It's not taken for granted anymore. We've got to say things like logic's not bad. Maybe not just like that, but we've got to actually engage this idea of an audience who might very willing to listen to us and say yes to everything, and then say, "I don't care," and just walk away. There were also efforts to try to engage in the church carried over. I think one of the most significant ones you may remember, I don't think it happens so much anymore, would be when you would do Bible studies, and you could have a Bible study, and the question would be, "Hey, what does this scripture say to you?" And then you go all the way around the circle, and everybody says what it said to them. And that's great, because scripture can speak by the work of the Holy Spirit. I've had some whoppers of bad sermons that people have Spirit do some good work with. Like it's good that the Spirit does that, but there's another question, right? What does it mean? Like, what does it mean? Not just what is me, but like, yeah, okay, but what does it mean? And there were relativistic, there were postmodern Bible studies where it was just satisfactory to just go around the room and say, "What does this mean to you?" Then we have some cookies, we have some coffee, we fellowship for a little while, and we go home. And we don't go to, what does it mean? The relativist world was possible to make a line with Christianity, because really under relativism, there was only one rule. Don't push your beliefs on anyone else. Right? That was really the only absolute rule. Believe what you want, but be nice about it. Don't push your beliefs on anybody else. That's what it was. Don't push your beliefs on anybody else. Now why all of that about relativism? Because I want you to think about the world right now. there are Christians still talking about engaging relativists, engaging pluralism, engaging postmodernism. So think about picture, this sort of fundamental picture modernism. Everybody's nice and gets along, and they don't push their views on other people. That is dead. Right? That's dead. And I don't mean dead in the church. I mean that's dead everywhere. Relativism is gone. And if you're still answering to relativism, you're not answering to the audience you're going to have. And I'm going to kind of explain where I think we've gone to, because one of the problems is relativism was easy to distinguish from Christianity. If you were a relativist, then the resurrection was your private belief and didn't really matter. I mean, that was pretty straightforwardly against all of what the church had taught forever. But relativism in the normal way, relativism in all of history has always died fast. It's happened before, it'll happen again, it dies quickly. But it didn't die into this nice, peaceful, pluralistic world in which we all get along, believing our own things, and who cares being nice. It died into. I'm gonna try to. It's not the term in the world, but I think both pieces of this will be helpful. I hope as you think about your audience and as you teach, and I think you'll recognize. Say relativism has now turned anti-critical fundamentalism. Critical fundamentalism. I used to say uncritical, but I don't think that's true anymore. I think it's actually anti-critical fundamentalism. And what I mean is, we've gone from a world in which it's like truth is truth. We've gone to a world in which we're willfully anti-critical about our beliefs, and we treat anti-critical. We don't want to hear against it. We only want to hear stuff for it. And fundamentalism, where every belief treated like a religious belief. Like every belief is treated like a religious belief. And when I first started talking about anti-critical fundamentalism, I didn't have as easy examples as I do now. I mean, I just want you to think about masks for a little bit. And it's fascinating because somebody's going to get mad about masks in the next few minutes. Think about masks. This is fascinating that this little piece of paper that we could put over our face would be as divisive as it's been. I don't love masks. I've learned not to eat cheese at lunch. I mean, luckily they're going away. They're not quite as common as they were. I forget them sometimes and have to walk back to the car. It's not a fun thing to put on. But everybody, for a while, everybody was an expert about masks. And not only was everybody, not everybody agreed, but he was an expert about masks. If you weren't like them, that was cause for anger and frustration. Knox teaches students internationally, and we've got students that are high house churches in China, and they're taking classes, and they're on Zoom sessions with students talking about religious persecutions because they have to wear a mask in church. And I'm like, you just need to shut up. Stop talking right now. Masks were like religious. Like, I know it can see the virus escaping, it's doing any good. Or I know, like, I'm going to be down the middle of the street, I'm wearing a mask, there's nobody within 100 feet of me, but I'm still protected because one virus might have been floating. Everything was religious and critical. Let me break down those two pieces and talk to you about how I think they can impact you as you're preaching a little bit further, and then also why I think it's worse and scarier for the church than relativism was. So first, let me break down the anti-critical part a bit further. So when I talk about being anti-critical, one of the things that we have, and I grade papers all the time, it's the worst part of teaching. Grade papers, part of the rubric is engaging well with other people's ideas, your opponent's ideas. Have you engaged well with other people's ideas? It's usually one of the toughest parts of the rubrics that I'm grading. It's one that many students have a very hard time doing. But culturally, think about how we engage other people's ideas. So one of the things that I notice is the internet has really boosted our ability to build microcultures online of particular ideas. I talk a lot about theology topics, and I used to start, if I was trying to illustrate an idea, I'd go back to the earth being round. And I could use that as like an illustration, like everybody in here agrees, right? The earth is round. Nope, not anymore. 3 different times. I've had somebody stand up during a talk, challenge that I'm like, the fact that the earth is round gets challenged and causes great upset, and the person leaves. And I come to find out there's a community you could join, an online community of flat earthers. There's an online community of flat earthers, and the flat earthers talk to each other about how the earth is flat, and there's there's really intelligent people involved in that community. There's really arguments. I've got a buddy who's a smart guy who got caught up in it for a bit. I was like, man, you got to get out. You got to get out. But you can build a community where everybody agrees. A community where everybody agrees, and then we do something within that community. We look for outside voices that are experts who agree with us. We expert shop. And idiots who disagree with us. We idiot shop. And Twitter's beautiful for this. And I know that you have either, if you're a Twitter person, you've done it, you've participated in it, or people are doing it to you. And if not, somebody's at least sent you screenshots of tweets. If it's an anti-mask person, then they've got some doctor, some expert, some super fancy degree person who says are completely ineffective, and boom, tweet it out to as many people as we can possibly send it out to. Here's an expert who agrees with me. Masks are worthless. But we do that part, and it's like, oh, there it is. One person, fancy degree, agrees with me, send it out to all my friends. We get reinforced. Boom, there's somebody that's smarter than me that agrees with me. I like it. It helps me to feel better. But we also love the idiots who disagree with us. Now, Twitter is great because we can amplify both intelligence and idiocy on Twitter by sharing. And there are lots of people saying things, and you guys all work in churches, and so you know lots of people say lots of crazy things. Somebody has said what you disagree with in a way that is just ridiculous. And that tweet, boom, let's go, get it out, send it out to everybody. So we can live in a world where we build a community where we don't have alternative ideas. We willfully don't engage with alternative ideas. We search, and we friends, colleagues, coworkers who are scouring the web with us or anything that confirms what we already think. We share it. We feel even better. This is so great. And we look for the worst possible examples of the alternative views, share those, and we get reinforced. Far, far away from actually being critical and saying, hey, I want about this. For me to really understand this position in a good way, I need to hear, for me to understand my position, right? The old debate. Here's what we got to do when we debate. We alternative view. We've got to know it better than our opponent. We've got to know all the strengths and weaknesses, and we've got to be able to deal with those so that we can argue for our position better. We have thrown that completely away. And this is in the church, but we do it in the church. This is the culture has been reshaped by the absolute avoidance of good arguments for the opposing positions. At avoidance opportunities to engage any kind of other ideas. And at the willful search for any kind of reinforcement for what I already think. Asks, it should have been a curiosity. At least, where did curiosity go? At least, I wonder if these will work. Hey, where is the science for it, and how well will they? I wear it when I'm alone in my car, and is going to be very effective. I mean, these kinds of it would do just thinking about it and looking for answers and looking for ideas, but we don't. We are not. Relativism said, believe what you want, and we've taken that part and said, I am going to believe what I want, and I don't want anything that makes me have to change my mind. Anti-cool. And the fun piece is this sort of shocking way in which I think, and I'm not 100% sold on fundamentalism being the right word. I'm trying to use it generally in everything being a fundamental. Everything being a test of loyalty, everything being a test of team, every kind of statement being an opportunity to find out, oh, you're one of them. One of my friends that I've talked with this about said, he's like, I don't know that I'm sold on the religion idea, but he's like, it's like truths are sports teams that we root. Like we'll get an idea, like if you're pro-mask, like being pro-Dolphins. I'm a Dolphins fan, so I'm sad all the time, but I'm near Detroit, and so they're even all the time. At least I don't have my quarterbacks who's escaped and about to win the Super Bowl. Nobody from the Dolphins wins the Super Bowl. We root, like I root for them, and he's losing. I'm still like, come on, you can do it. And it's like, he says it's like we do that with these I'm tied to masks, don't work. And if any data comes out, it's like, oh man, they're 10 effective. Well, 10%, that's got to be within the margin of error. There's no way this could really be true. Like I don't want to know the truth. I've got the truth and I'm rooting for mine to win. And the mask is an example because it's so silly that it's divisive the way that it has been divisive. But it has people get angry. If you agree about what percentage of virus gets out through the math, they get angry. This is my team, or this is my religion. But I think it impacts us if we go into preaching, because going beyond masks, and I mean, we had an interim pastor, we had a guy, we had two families that left the church because we were renting. We had to have masks on, but we said, we've got people in the church that are minimized, like wear a mask. And I mean, they left the church because we said, put a mask on in church, departed, went someplace else, found a church that do it that way. One of the things that this results in, this anti-critical fundamentalism, is words really aren't carrying meaning anymore. Words are like banners. I want you to think, and I'm going to presume I'm in a relatively safe space on this, but I do the students as well. I want you to think about some phrases that we ought to all be very happy with. The phrases: Black lives matter, blue lives matter, baby lives matter, all lives matter. Now think about those 4 quick phrases. Those are all 4 really good expressions of Christian doctrine regarding the image of God we're created. But they're not functioning that way. I mean, remove Black Lives Matter organization, remove the words from just the words themselves. They cause emotions. In fact, you can imagine a situation in which, whether it's Blue Matter or Black Lives Matter that comes first, the second one is an answer. And it's an angry answer. It's a rebuke. You start with Black Lives Matter, then it's, well, Blue Lives Matter. If you start with Lives Matter, it's, well, Black Lives Matter. Why? Because these words are not carrying content that says human life matters and be treated with dignity. Baby lives matter. A great expression of the same kind of language. Why the voicelessness of the unborn should be a travesty in a society that otherwise tries to care for the voiceless. And all lives as the sort of capture of, hey, as Christians, to be able to say that in a way that's affirmative and positive, to say, hey, listen, we want to make you aware that this is that says, this is a faith. Our God says you are all made in the image of God. And secularism can't give you anything on that. The only equality secularism has to offer is equality in the meaninglessness. If you want meaning, you don't get equality without God. Only God can give real equality. That these words would be statements of, and we need to live that way. We need to treat people that way. They ought to be positive words within the church. They aren't even carrying meaning. We don't even engage the meaning. They are banners. And if I say Black Lives Matter, I have placed a banner. If I say Blue Lives Matter, I have a banner. What kind of a banner? A secular political banner. And I'm off the team or on the team. So many words become, they are like our sports jerseys that we put on. And see, one of the things for us, I think, that's really important as we think about and teaching in the church is that we, on the one hand, we want to use words as words that carry meaning, as opposed to words that set banners out and declare teams. But we also have to be careful to recognize we have audience. And so while on the one hand we want to speak to the audience with words that carry truth, we also have to recognize that words are not in many people's mind being truth anymore. They're declaring allegiances. And so there's care to be taken from the pulpit in many ways that are unfortunate, to use language in ways that we take care that what we aren't doing have a chance to speak is declaring an allegiance that will prevent people from hearing us from then on. Now, this is one of those areas where preaching becomes so tricky because we need to contextualize our words. We need to be speaking to the audience we've got, but we can't so contextualize that the message goes away. Under relativism, contextualization often ended up meaning, when it went too far, that the universality of the gospel and the work of Christ would disappear. Or don't say anything universal because then people will get upset and they'll leave because it's the only bad thing. And you just get this washed out gospel. And one of the fears here could put us in a position where we don't get to talk about issues that really are significant social issues. Because if we engage too strongly, then people will tune out. They'll already you're on and they're out of there. They're done. They're not going to listen to you anymore. And yet at the same time, we don't want to be so declarative about some of these that are secondary to the gospel that we don't get the audience in the first place. I currently worship at many of you will be familiar with it, a PCA church, Choral Presbyterian Church, right? And D. James Kennedy, who was the founding pastor there, towards the end of his career became extremely involved in politics. Very much a Reclaiming America, a lobbying group, was part of the ministry of the church. A very significant piece of being in church there was nationalism in American politics, and it was everywhere in church. Now, I think at that time period, it's not where I would be anyways, but I think you could get away with 30 years ago, can today, when your church presents itself politically. Because of the way this new culture works, you're not only going to risk having people who need to hear the gospel never come inside the doors, because with very simple and subtle statements in politics, you have placed a banner in the ground far beyond what you ever meant and what's really true, in a way that declares you to be the other team to people who won't hear from you past that. But I also think you may find that when you plant some of those banners, you attract people who aren't attracted to the gospel, but they're attracted to those political ideas, a way that helps to make churches into some of the very same sounding chambers that we can get online, where we don't hear anybody who thinks differently than us. And we'll get support for ideas that are tangential to the gospel, maybe consistent with the gospel, but not part of the gospel, getting cheered on. And I don't know about you, but I like it when people like what I've said. I wish I didn't, but I like it. I like it when they like what I said. And when we get into some of these comments, we can make statements that actually has people cheer. I hate cheering during worship services, but lots of people do it, and it's great if you do, except it's wrong. But you get that clapping. I'm preaching at Coral Ridge. They clap at Coral Ridge, even though it's super traditional. They do that. And if I say something and people clap, it feels good. It makes me want to think less. What I said, I just want to say that again. Like, let me just. What did I say? I'll get that in the next sermon too. Like it has an impact on us as pastors too, and elders. See, the thing about relativism is relativism was obviously contradictory to Christianity. But this new movement, there's a lot of overlap. We're supposed to have truths that we grab onto, and we're committed to them. Now, we shouldn't be anti-critical, but we do take care. I mean, the truth of the resurrection, engage that. When people have raised questions, we go in apologetics, and we're grateful for those who've really done the research on the resurrection. But we hold fast to that. If there's no resurrection, there's no faith. We should or do something better than that. If there's no, we do have truths, are those ones that we have to hold fast to. But we've got to be careful. Don't get embedded in a culture that loves truths that are that kind of truth. Yes, don't let it go. Relativism was never going to work for Christianity, but this works. I've got truth that, and you know what? Another truth that I can never let go of is masks don't work. Right? The idea that there would be these silly extra, even if they don't work, that we would lose our minds over having to put a little paper over our face within the church because some people think they work. And you can flip it. The mask, I'm not taking a position on masks. You flip it either way. It shouldn't be that mad, but it's a culture that encourages us to build these siloed pieces of truth that we hold fast to in faith, like we do the resurrection, but they're everywhere. They're political, they're scientific, they're physical. It's like we're rooting for everything. And so as you watch in the church, in your preaching and in your teaching, I'm going to suggest take care on the topics you pick up and take on the language you use. Topics you pick up and the language you used without falling into that kind of relativistic mistake of washing out the gospel, but recognize that this is a culture that you intend to carry truth. May work more like putting on a sports jersey for the wrong team. And if you just take care to watch trigger words, those banner words, those ones that stand like the pennant, the banner, you hold the pole up and it's God, this is who I'm fighting for. Watch out for those. Because by you may get the wrong kind of encouragement and people away who never have a chance to hear the truth because they're wired to see words as banners. But then also to watch, it's always trickier. Keep the church pure in a culture that has church-like features than it is in one that's completely contradictory. And this culture has a church-like feature, this commitment to truths, this holding fast to truths, this guarantee, like this is what it is real. That's good that people have some of that back. It's good that died. That relativism is dying is good, but the problem is, again, as a secular move, that's everything, and nobody wants to hear anything different. And so to take care that as we go through in our preaching and teaching, we don't get this sort of encouragement. It feels good like likes on Twitter. It feels good to be encouraged in some of these pieces that we find that we've been carried beyond holding fast to the gospel into holding fast to aspects of our current society that are neither here nor there with respect to Christian truth. And there's a lot of those. And they're tricky to see. I mean, even if you engage with masks and you say, right, but it's about freedom from religious oppression, which the religious part I can't get, but even just it's about personal civil liberties. The gospel has never promised civil liberties. Yeah, civil liberties come out of the influence of Christianity. We were never promised that. If civil liberties go away like they have in so many other countries, what's our job? Preach the gospel, make disciples. We can lament it. I mean, it stings. I'd rather not ever be told what to do. But that's not our purpose, is to prevent liberties from being destroyed. Our purpose is to preach the gospel in whatever kind of world we've got. And be careful that in this culture, we don't grab on because it feels good, extras. It's not that we don't love civil liberties, it's that that's not what we're for. That's not what we're all about. That's not what the gospel is for. And I think it's going to be easy to be influenced as pastors as well because, man, it feels good to be supported. It does. To me, I like it. Maybe I'm the only one, but I suspect I'm not. So the kind of big ideas to take away here, and I've really gone back over them. I think the little piece of the first part, I want to encourage you. I suspect that some of the old battles that we fought over worship style and the preaching style and the exact liturgical elements, I suspect some of that less important than it used to be. I have a feeling that, to go back to the prior meeting, that as you guys talk about engaging the world and preaching and even having people you can preach and teach, that working towards a church that demonstrates the activity, that gospel activity of caring for the world around you, I suspect that's going to be more powerful than it was for years. And we should have been doing it all the way along regardless, because we're not doing it to get people, but if it gets people, that's good. I think seeing that as being a real positive church is good. But within your preaching and within your teaching culture of your church, I think you need to be careful when you start reading books on how to engage a pluralistic society. I think a lot of those old tools that were used for pluralism and like preaching truth, there's truth, that actually reinforces this culture. It's the wrong move. It's the wrong playbook. And to recognize the change in culture, to recognize the ways in which we've got people fighting against hearing anything they don't agree with. We've got people treating almost everything as if it's religious, as if it's a religious viewpoint. And the way in which words are not being treated as carriers of truth, because remember that was part of what relativism said was, it was the postmodernism was words can't carry truth, so they might as well just be jerseys, banners, ways of bearing allegiance. And to take care as you preach and teach to be aware when you're using words that are going to be banner word, and when you're being sort of engaged and put into that kind of banner word, show your allegiance, get cheered, that kind of microculture type thing that's happening in society.